Amidst the smoke and fire of the Middle East, an ancient script is being executed with millimetric precision. When the prophets Daniel and Jeremiah called out Persia by name, they weren't just talking about the past. They were providing a blueprint for the exact events unfolding on our news feeds over the last 24 hours. Is Iran the world's doomsday clock, ticking down its final seconds? How can ancient codes pinpoint the exact coordinates of today's earth-shattering explosions? Here are 5 shocking prophecies that have leapt off the ancient scrolls and into reality, proving one thing: the global script isn't just in the hands of politicians, it was written millennia ago. Decoding the first prophecy, Daniel, the two-horned ram on the world map. When Iran challenges the global order, look directly at the map of the Middle East today, an Iran besieged by decades of suffocating sanctions, yet possessing a frenzied expanding power. They are not standing still to take the blow. Despite the blockades of superpowers, Iran is openly ramming down every geopolitical barrier. Their ballistic missiles reach Iraq, suicide drones appear in Ukraine, and their proxies are strangling vital oil straits to the south. This is not a nation on the defense. This is an entity rising with supreme arrogance. The leadership in Tehran acts as if they hold an invincible military prerogative. The world wonders in shock, where does the source of this unprecedented aggression come from? The answer does not lie in Western intelligence reports, but in a destiny file sealed 2,600 years ago. The Terrifying Vision by the Ulai River. The story begins on a quiet evening in 550 before Christ at the palace of Susa. Beside the Ulai River, a man stood silently watching the water flow. That man was Daniel. He was not born in this land. Decades earlier, as a teenager of Jewish royal lineage, Daniel was shackled by the Babylonian army and dragged away from his devastated home of Jerusalem. He was cast into the heart of a foreign empire, forced to learn the language of his enemies and serve in palaces teeming with intrigue. But instead of being swallowed whole, that young man used an ironclad faith to overcome every trap from the lion's den to the fiery furnace, eventually becoming a majestic prime minister second only to the king. Now, with hair turned white, Daniel stood there on the threshold between reality and the supernatural to receive a vision that would shake the future of humanity. The rustling water of the Ulai River suddenly vanished into a deathly silence. The reality around Daniel was ripped apart. From the hazy mist over the river, a giant creature materialized, a ram. But this was no gentle animal of the pasture. It carried a terrifying power with 2 long, sharp horns curving like precious swords. Daniel squinted and noticed an anomaly. These 2 horns did not grow at the same time. The first horn was already large, but the second horn, which grew later, soared higher, sharper, and possessed a power that completely overwhelmed the first. Suddenly, the ram began to move. The sound of hooves pounding the ground echoed like thunder. It did not walk. It charged with uncontainable fury. Daniel watched in horror as the beast crazily rammed toward the west, dust clouds obscuring the sky. It spun to sweep toward the north and lunged straight toward the south. The Bible records Daniel's terror. No animal could stand against him, and none could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased and became great. Daniel 8:4. Decoding the Vision. When the angel named Persia. Just as Daniel was sinking into utter confusion, a blinding light tore through the vision. The angel Gabriel appeared majestic and radiant, his voice booming like a divine decree to shatter all ambiguity. The 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. Daniel 8:20. Persia is the ancient name for modern-day Iran. The horn that grew later but higher was the prophecy that the Persians would rise later than their Median neighbors, but would subsequently surge to swallow their power and create an empire that dominated humanity. The Bible does not use vague metaphors. It points directly to this nation and stamps onto its destiny a specific military genetic code, always rising from behind and always expanding with unstoppable force. The three directions of ramming and Tehran's military map compare the three directions of the ram's attack in the Bible with Iran's actual strategy today. To see the shock ramming west, Iran is pushing with full force toward the borders of Israel and the Mediterranean through the Syria-Lebanon corridor. Ramming south through Houthi forces in Yemen, they are strangling the choke point straits where the world's oil is transported. Ramming north, establishing tight military alliances with northern powers, such as Russia, to change the world order. The phrase, "did as he pleased," accurately decodes why the Tehran leadership dares to defy every UN resolution or US sanction. They do not act according to conventional political logic. They are operating on the instinct of the two-horned ram destined by the Ulai River all those years ago. The footsteps of destiny have arrived. Daniel's two-horned ram is no longer a dusty page in a religious library. It has stepped into the real world in flesh and blood, in the steel of tanks and the fire of missiles. What we saw on the news last night is actually the sound of this beast's hooves pounding the earth after thousands of years of sleep. Iran is following the script of the Almighty with unstoppable power. However, behind this brutal military might is a great imperial identity that was once called by God himself with strange respect. Which king laid the foundation for that soul, and why was a foreign nation anointed by God? Let's turn back to the decree of the legendary King Cyrus to understand why this land holds a unique status in the eyes of God. The pride of imperial blood. In Tehran, or the fiery squares of Iran today, grand military parades take place. Amidst the most modern missile arrays, one can always catch glimpses of the ancient reliefs of the Achaemenid Empire, images of eagles and immortal Persian warriors. Why have the Iranian people been able to resiliently endure suffocating sanctions for decades without bowing their heads? It is because in their veins flows not just religion, but an extreme pride in a Persian empire, the greatest to ever exist in human history. They do not see themselves as an ordinary Islamic nation. They see themselves as the masters of the Middle East. This pride does not come from gunpowder. It comes from an ancient identity designated in the Bible as a powerful protector. The castaway child, and the destiny of the shepherd. To understand why a foreign king was called the Anointed One in the Bible, a title usually reserved for messiahs, we must look at his thrilling roots. Cyrus did not appear by chance. He was the result of a game of destiny played between ancient empires. In the 6th century before Christ, the land of modern-day Iran was dominated by the powerful Median Empire. King Astyages of Media dreamed that a vine grew from his daughter's womb and covered all of Asia. Astrologers decoded it in terror. The grandson, soon to be born, would overthrow his throne. Fearful of destiny, Astyages ordered his subordinates to take the newborn child into the deep forest to be eliminated. But fate smiled on Cyrus when he was raised in secret by a family of shepherds. Growing up amidst the harshness of the mountains and forests, Cyrus possessed the prowess of a leopard and the calm of a natural-born ruler. When the truth of his identity was revealed, instead of being killed, he rallied the small Persian tribes to rise up and overthrow his own grandfather, uniting the two bloodlines of Media and Persia, exactly the image of the second horn that grew later, but higher in Daniel's dream that we decoded in the previous chapter. The unthinkable march and the shocking moment before the ancient text. The precedent for ancient wars was blood for blood, but Cyrus created a completely different precedent conquest through tolerance. In 539 before Christ, when attacking Babylon, an impregnable fortress with massive walls, Cyrus executed a stroke of tactical genius. Instead of using catapults, he ordered his soldiers to dig channels diverting the entire Euphrates River, which flowed through the city into a man-made reservoir. That night, as the water level receded, the Persian army quietly waded through the dry riverbed, entering straight through the city gates that the Babylonians had carelessly left open in a drunken stupor. Babylon fell without excessive bloodshed, but the most shocking moment in spiritual history happened immediately after. Imagine Cyrus the king, who had just conquered the world, stepping into the room of the Jewish priests. They tremblingly opened the parchment scrolls of the prophet Isaiah, written 150 years earlier, and pointed out the lines to him, "Who says of Cyrus, 'He is my shepherd, and will accomplish all that I please. I will go before you, and will level the mountains. I will break down gates of bronze and cut through bars of iron." Isaiah 44, 28, 45, 1-5. Cyrus was stunned. His name, his tactic of diverting the river, and even the open gates of Babylon, all of it had been accurately recorded before he was even formed. The shiver felt before heavenly power led this great king to issue an unprecedented decree. Instead of making the Jews slaves, he liberated them, provided gold, silver, and cedar wood, and ordered the entire empire to support their return, to rebuild the Temple of Jerusalem. Cyrus became the only king in history acclaimed by the Bible as the Anointed One, the one who acted on behalf of God to execute justice and mercy on earth, from protector to adversary. However, history is a cycle full of bitterness. Compare Cyrus's decree of tolerance from years ago with the fiery hostility of today's Tehran leadership toward Israel. Why has a nation that was once the helper of God's people now sworn to wipe Israel off the map? This is the corruption of the two-horned ram in Daniel's vision. The Persian soul remains great, but its direction has been steered by ambition and arrogance. The pride once used to protect what was right has now become a weapon to challenge the heavens. Modern Iran is trying to revive the glory of Cyrus, but they reject the one who anointed that king. They are walking straight into the script of the end times when the old protector becomes the new attacker. An indelible identity, the world's first declaration of human rights, currently resides in the British Museum. It is a fossilized witness to a truth God once laid a foundation in this land, and he is still watching its every heartbeat. Persia matters because they carry the weight of destiny. But as the ram begins to use its arrogant horns to butt against God's plan, another dark alliance will soon emerge from the far north to pull them into a great war that will shake the entire planet. Decoding the second prophecy, Ezekiel 38, the Red Alert Alliance. When mortal enemies become brothers. Never before in modern history has the union between the Russian bear and the Persian leopard become so intimate and terrifying. The handshakes between leaders in Moscow and Tehran are forging a transcontinental military alliance that directly challenges the Western order. Why would nations so fundamentally different in ideology, religion, and culture find common ground in a life-and-death alliance? The answer does not lie in recently signed diplomatic treaties, but in a captive camp by the ancient Chebar River. There, a list of ancient names was precisely recorded, waiting for the day these chess pieces would automatically move into position on the end times chessboard. Flashback the fiery nightmare by the Chebar River. Travel back in time to 593 before Christ. The setting is tragic. Jerusalem has just been leveled, the temple burned, and tens of thousands of Jews dragged like livestock to Babylon. Among the ragged tents along the banks of the Chebar River, a branch of the Euphrates lived a man named Ezekiel. He was not just an exile. He was a priest who had lost everything. He had no temple to serve in and no homeland to lean on. On a fateful day, as Ezekiel stood silently by the riverbank, where the sound of flowing water mingled with the silent weeping of the homeless, space suddenly warped. A violent whirlwind blew in from the north, carrying a massive fiery cloud. Amidst that blinding radiance, Ezekiel was lifted from reality, and the fabric of time was torn apart to reveal a terrifying vision of the latter days. In the vision, the northern sky suddenly turned pitch black. Ezekiel looked up and saw a colossal army pouring down like a black flood. These were not the armies of his era. They carried strange weapons and an unprecedented, cold, murderous intent. Ezekiel watched in shock as warriors from distant lands approached, carrying shields of glowing bronze, their spears bristling like a forest of sharp iron, so numerous that the Bible describes them as covering the land like a cloud. Amidst the deathly silence before the storm, a majestic voice, booming like thunder from the heavens, called out the name of the leader of that army, a mysterious figure whose name history had never known, O Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Meshech and Tubal. I am against you. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army, your horses, your horsemen fully armed. Ezekiel 38, 1-4. Ezekiel stood frozen, his eyes glazed with terror. He saw that Gog, the ruler of the north, did not march alone. Behind him was a strange alliance. He recognized the Persian-Iranian warriors with their cold, sharp eyes and sturdy armor. Next were the armies of Cush Sudan and Put Libya, with skin bronzed by the desert sun carrying brutal weapons. And finally, the troops of Gomer and Togarmah, Turkey, from the snow-capped peaks of the north. Why would peoples thousands of miles apart who never had diplomatic ties now merge into a swirling torrent of steel? Ezekiel saw them assembling in the land of Gog, receiving weapons from Gog, and under the command of this northern figure, they pointed their spears directly at Israel, a land that Ezekiel saw at that time living in peace without walls or gates for protection. The feeling of suffocation, the overwhelming numbers, and the chill of an invasion from the far north made Ezekiel tremble. He understood he was witnessing a play where the stage was the entire world. He recorded every name and every detail of this alliance with absolute certainty. When Persia shakes hands with the one from the far north, that is when the doomsday clock begins its countdown. The blacklist steps into reality. The list that Ezekiel tremblingly recorded that year represents geographic coordinates that are staggeringly accurate on a modern map. For thousands of years, scholars have tried to decode these codenames, and now everything is as clear as day. Magog. Ancient historians like Josephus confirmed this as the land of the Scythians in the extreme north, relative to Jerusalem, the coordinates of modern-day Russia. Moscow is the capital situated on the most direct northern axis from the Holy Land. Persia, an unmistakable identification of the nation of Iran. Cush and Put representing Islamic nations in the regions of Sudan and Libya. Gomer and Togarmah, the ancient land of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. The shock lies in this: 2,600 years ago, these nations had no military ties whatsoever. In fact, many of them viewed each other as mortal enemies. But today, for the first time in human history, all these names are converging into a single bloc against the Western Order, possessing nuclear weapons, hypersonic missiles, and a shared ambition to erase current borders. When the hook of destiny pulls the superpowers into the fray. Why would a nuclear superpower like Russia, Magog, humble itself to shake hands so tightly with Iran, Persia? The Bible uses an incredibly sharp image to decode this: I will put hooks in your jaws and pull you out. Russia originally had its own orbit, but political events, sanctions, and international isolation have become the invisible hook, dragging this northern giant southward, forcing them into a life-and-death alliance with Iran. This handshake is no longer a calculation by politicians. It is the operation of a destiny that has already been sealed. A red alert alliance is taking shape, matching every name and every geographical position in Ezekiel's vision. When the armies of Magog and Persia appear together in the Arabian Sea, that is the moment prophecy leaves the ancient pages to become a military entity ready to shake the planet. The Ezekiel 38 alliance is no longer a mystical story for believers. It has become an existing military dossier. The giant chess pieces are in position, the list of names is complete, and the murderous intent from the north is beginning to spread. When these giants merge their strength, the world faces not just a war, but an unprecedented military earthquake. What will the resonance between nuclear technology and imperial ambition create? How can the combined power of Russia and Iran produce an apocalyptic war machine? The military earthquake. 1. When giants shake hands. The symbiosis of the northern dragon and the Persian leopard. The world is witnessing a shocking and ironic reality. Russia, a nuclear superpower with a legendary military history, is now borrowing drone technology from Iran to change the situation on the battlefield. Conversely, Iran is rapidly installing electronic brains, global satellite positioning technology, and advanced S-400 air defense systems from Moscow. This is no longer a minor arms trading relationship. This is the union of the northern brain Russia and the Persian arm Iran. One side provides nuclear intelligence and diplomatic patronage, while the other provides proxy strike capabilities and a massive arsenal of ballistic missiles. This resonance creates a geopolitical pincer, tightening from the Black Sea down to the Strait of Hormuz, directly threatening the economic jugular of the entire planet. The vision of the storm from the north and the army of giants. To deeply understand the terror of this handshake, we must return to Ezekiel as he knelt by the Chebar River, his eyes fixed on the fiery sky of his vision. In that vision, Ezekiel did not just see a list of nations. He saw how they merged their power into a single entity. Ezekiel describes Gog, the leader of the land of Magog, not as an ordinary king, but as a coordinator of forces. He saw Gog preparing an army as numerous as locusts, carrying spears and shields of glowing bronze. In biblical spirituality, the north is always the symbol of the most terrible judgment. Every horrifying calamity that befell the Holy Land originated from this direction. Ezekiel recounts that God said to Gog, "Get ready, be prepared you and all the hordes gathered about you and take command of them." Ezekiel 38:7. This detail is extremely important. Magog does not go alone. It acts as the guard commander for the entire alliance. Imagine the scene of millions of Persian Kushite and Putit warriors standing under the technical protection and command of Magog. It is an army carrying the power of giants, a metaphor for forces with overwhelming destructive power far beyond normal human capability to resist. Ezekiel saw how these giants shook hands. Magog brought organizational strength and northern weaponry, while Persia brought the fire of hatred and fanaticism. That combination forms a black military storm that obscures the sun, making the ground beneath Israel's feet tremble before the battle even begins. Decoding the vision. Why does this handshake create an earthquake? Because it is the perfect compensation for each other's flaws, creating a war machine without gaps. Magog's strength. Russia provides nuclear patronage, making opponents wary of direct military intervention. They provide satellites so that the arrows of Persia fly more accurately. Persian zeal. Iran provides numbers and recklessness. They have thousands of drones and missiles ready to deplete every defensive resource of the enemy. This resonance is the hook in the jaws mechanism mentioned in the Bible. Russia and Iran are now bound to each other by shared fear and shared ambition. They are no longer two separate nations. They have become a single military earthquake. When reality fits the ancient manuscript. The leaders in Moscow or Tehran may not read the Bible, but every move they make is automatically executing Ezekiel's script. Russia supporting nuclear technology for Iran is exactly how they take command, or act as a guard for Persia. Their joint military exercises are the image of hordes gathered about you that Ezekiel described chillingly 2,600 years ago. This correspondence exposes a reality the military earthquake we see today is not accidental. It is the manifestation of the army of the northern giants preparing for a conflict whose outcome will forever change the face of the world. We realize that the Magog-Persia alliance is no longer a hypothesis. The weapons are loaded, the technology has merged, and the murderous intent from the north is enveloping the Holy Land. However, just as the power of this resonance reaches its peak, an invisible force will begin to break them in a way that no supercomputer could ever calculate. Decoding the third prophecy, Jeremiah 49:35. When the bow of Elam is broken, the helplessness of the rain of fire. In unprecedented large-scale raids, Iran has flaunted its massive ballistic arsenal, forcing Western supercomputers to work at full capacity. However, the resulting data is one of shocking silence. The Fatah or K-Bar Shaykan missiles advertised as invisible to radar suddenly became sitting ducks easily shot down. It doesn't stop there. A series of unintended incidents have occurred right at Iran's top-secret weapons research centers. Unexplained explosions and computer viruses piercing the most isolated security systems are turning the nation's military pride into scrap metal. Why would a bow sharpened for decades break at the most decisive moment thunderous decrees amidst the death throes of an empire? Let us step back into the past to the year 598 before Christ. Jerusalem at that time was no longer the brilliant capital of Solomon, but a city groaning under the heel of foreign invaders. Amidst the walls mottled with smoke and fire, there was a man named Jeremiah, a lonely man living in the 600s before Christ in Jerusalem. He was not a strategic politician, but a Jewish priest shunned by his own people. Jeremiah is often called the weeping prophet because his whole life was a lament. He wept for his city about to be leveled, and he suffered having to preach prophecies that no one wanted to hear. He was imprisoned and thrown into a deep mud pit simply for daring to tell the truth that arrogant empires were about to collapse. On a dark night when the entire ancient world seemed to be disintegrating, Jeremiah was suddenly swept into a strange vision. The space around him transformed abruptly. He was no longer standing in the ruins of Jerusalem. He found himself looking toward the land of Elam, a powerful kingdom located in what is now southwestern Iran. In that fiery vision, Jeremiah saw the armies of Elam pouring out like a whirlwind. Imagine the majesty of these expert marksmen. They were the terror of every kingdom of that era. Their core weapon was not the sword or spear, but bows meticulously crafted from precious wood and animal sinews, possessing the power to pierce any armor from a distance. For the Elamites, the bow was not just a tool of war. It was their soul, their pride, and the mainstay of their might that helped them dominate neighboring lands. Jeremiah saw tens of thousands of Elamite archers simultaneously draw their bows, the taut strings emitting deadly hisses preparing to pour a rain of destructive arrows upon other nations. But at the very moment that pride reached its peak, the sky suddenly ripped open. A stern voice, authoritative as thunder, tore through the night and struck the land of Elam. This is what the Lord Almighty says, "See, I will break the bow of Elam, the mainstay of their might." Jeremiah 49:35. Feel Jeremiah's shock as he witnessed heavenly power executed before his eyes. There was no army in direct opposition, no arrow fired back. An invisible wave of power swept through, and then dry cracks echoed in unison. The most flexible bows, the pride of an entire empire, suddenly shattered into pieces of dry kindling right in the hands of the most skilled warriors. Shock took over the vision. The Elamite warriors stood frozen, their hands trembling as they held broken pieces of wood, their eyes staring blankly at the sky. The strength they trusted most, the weapon that helped them become history's predators, suddenly became strangely useless. Jeremiah shuddered as he realized a grim message. When the one who holds the power over history orders something to be broken, even the most advanced human weapons are merely trash. The vision, decoded from ancient bow to ballistic missiles. The image of the bow that Jeremiah saw 2,600 years ago is actually a destiny code for long-range strike power. Compare this to reality. Modern Iran does not possess massive aircraft carrier fleets or a powerful array of fighter jets. The mainstay of their might used to deter the world is their massive arsenal of ballistic missiles. That is the bow of the 21st century. The staggering coincidence lies in the location Elam. This is precisely the modern-day Khuzestan province where Iran places its secret strategic long-range missile silos deep within mountains. The fact that the Bible says it will break the bow of Elam in that very land is an undeniable forecast of the neutralization of that core missile stockpile. The helplessness of hundreds of Iranian missiles intercepted last night, along with the mysterious incidents destroying military facilities right in Elam, is the word-for-word execution of the prophecy God breaks the strength they are most proud of and trust in most. When the bow is broken, the arrogant Persian warrior suddenly realizes he is standing naked before destiny. When the heavenly shield confronts the earthly spear, why must the bow of Elam be broken? The nature of this judgment lies in arrogance. When humans are confident that their weapons can wipe out a people, they have inadvertently placed themselves in opposition to the ruler of history. The current neutralization of Iran's arsenal is the most vivid proof the strongest weapon does not lie in its range or explosive power, but in its legitimacy before spiritual laws. Jeremiah saw thousands of years in advance that even if technology changes from bows and arrows to nuclear warheads, the end of a bow used to threaten the world will share the same fate, breaking in the middle of the task. When the mainstay of might is broken, the confidence of an empire collapses with it. But the sentence for Iran does not stop at iron and steel. When weapons have become useless, the next step will aim directly at those in power. Who will be the next to face the wrath of destiny? How will the purge from the sky sweep away the most arrogant thrones? Let's decode the next prophecy. Decoding the fourth prophecy. Jeremiah 49:38a Ebwine. The death of political gods. An earthquake sweeping away the power brain. Look at the shocking reality unfolding. Underground bunkers originally designed to withstand nuclear blasts in Tehran have become mass graves for those operating the axis of resistance. The simultaneous passing of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, along with key figures like Defense Minister Aziz Nasirzadeh and Intelligence Minister Esmail Khatib, is not merely a military loss, it is the collapse of an invincible symbol. Tehran has fallen into a state of total paralysis as its intelligence eyes are blinded and its strategic brain is wiped out. People ask, how could one of the world's densest security networks be pierced so easily? Could it be that this is not just a victory of airstrike technology, but a predestined purge that was sentenced long ago? Jeremiah, the prophet of tears and the sentence for Elam. While the city of Jerusalem was being trampled under the heels of the Babylonian expeditionary force, Jeremiah was swept into a chilling vision of the land of Elam, the powerful kingdom located in present-day southwestern Iran. In that vision, time and space seemed to rip apart, bringing him before the gates of the great Elamite capital of Susa. Jeremiah saw the kings and princes of Elam seated upon exquisitely carved thrones. Imagine their majesty surrounded by thousands of elite guards within the strongest glazed brick fortress walls of the ancient world. They were the arbiters of life and death, conceited in the belief that their power was eternal. They proclaimed themselves representatives of the divine, using extreme arrogance to sow fear across Asia, regarding no one as their equal. But just as their self-importance reached its peak, Jeremiah heard a steely decree echoing like a bolt of lightning, tearing through the clouds from the heights above. "I will set my throne in Elam and destroy her king and officials, declares the Lord." Jeremiah 49:38a. Feel the shock of this weeping prophet as he witnessed the power of the heavenly throne crush every earthly throne. No army attacked, not a single arrow was fired back by human hands. An invisible surge of power swept through, and Jeremiah saw those mighty kings suddenly vanish like smoke carried by the wind. He saw crowns falling and clattering on the cold stone floor. Those magnificent seats of power were suddenly hauntingly empty. God did not just destroy a few individuals. He was uprooting an entire leadership system, severing the head of the empire to erase human arrogance. The sentence Jeremiah saw is the code that deciphers the collapse of Iran's leadership today. The Bible does not speak of an accidental death, but identifies two core layers of power without which the entire institution fails. The king represents the supreme spiritual leader, the holder of absolute power, and the object of faith-based devotion, the supreme leader. The officials. These are the arms that execute power, the ministers of defense intelligence, and the corps generals. The simultaneous wiping out of both king and officials is God's way of breaking the legitimacy of a theocratic system. When those who consider themselves gods controlling a nation's destiny fall, their false sanctity is exposed. The strikes eliminating Iran's leadership today are the word-for-word execution of Jeremiah's sentence. He clears the seats of men to establish his own sovereignty. Why did modern bunkers become tombs for the leadership? The essence lies in the opposition between material strength and prophetic power. Iranian leaders placed absolute faith in stealth technology, intelligence networks, and meters-thick concrete, exactly as the ancient kings of Elam trusted in the impenetrable walls of Susa. But when the prophecy of Jeremiah declared, "I will destroy them there," the very place they deemed safest became the place where the sentence was carried out. Earthly power, even if it digs deep into the heart of a mountain, cannot stand when the heavenly throne decides to descend. Following the death of the leaders, fear will no longer be their weapon. Instead, those who remain will become its victims. The end of an era of hatred. The sentence for the king and his officials has been fully executed, marking the end of an era of pride. But with the head of the empire lost, how will the rest of the body react? What terror will envelop the streets of Tehran when their final pillars of belief are erased? How will an invisible fear swallow those who are left? How will the internal fracture foretold by Jeremiah manifest? Inside Tehran, the fracture of an institution. Never has the Iranian establishment been so frail and vulnerable. The simultaneous departure of the kings and officials has created a terrifying power vacuum, causing the remaining generals to fall into a state of extreme mutual suspicion. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, WIN-RGC intelligence network, once the regime's omniscient eyes, is now pierced by irreparable holes. Every strange sound in the sky, every leaked piece of information makes the remaining rulers tremble. They realize that fortified bunkers and dense Secret Service networks are no longer shields, but are becoming traps imprisoning them. This fracture does not come from external military pressure, but is the collapse of legitimacy and internal trust, a disintegration from within the very marrow of a dying empire. This aligns strikingly with Jeremiah's vision. Flashback. The whistling wind and terror at Susa Palace. The ancient Persian Empire suddenly turned cold. Jeremiah saw world-renowned marksmen with faces turned pale, their trembling hands dropping their precious bows. He heard the wind whistling through the crevices like the weeping of gods who had abandoned the land. The divine oracle rang out sternly amidst the silence of the vision, "I will terrify Elam before their enemies, before those who want to kill them. I will bring disaster on them." Jeremiah 49:37. In the original ancient Hebrew, the word terrify is not just ordinary fear, but a state of melting will. Jeremiah saw thousands of years in advance that when the heavenly sentence falls, the first thing destroyed is not the flesh, but the spirit of the ruler. He withdraws the wisdom of advisers and strips the courage from generals, causing a mighty institution to suddenly crumble like a sandcastle before a violent wave. When fear becomes a tool of judgment, the sentence of terror that Jeremiah saw is the code explaining Tehran's current chaos. The Bible does not speak of a conventional defeat, but of a paralysis of the soul. Betrayal. The leaking of intelligence leading to the death of leaders is the manifestation of God making them terrified before those who seek their lives. Disintegration. When soldiers no longer have a purpose to fight, when the elite are more concerned with fleeing than saving the nation, that is when the will of Elam has been broken exactly as prophesied. The current fracture of the Iranian establishment is living proof a system that relies on fear to rule will be collapsed by fear itself when the heavenly throne acts. Those who once sowed terror in other nations are now tasting the melting sensation Jeremiah described millennia ago. Why does terror envelop Elam so fiercely? The essence lies in God clearing away every barrier that separates man from the truth. When political idols fall and fear exposes the weakness of earthly power, that is when people begin to look higher. The panic in Tehran today is a necessary precursor to emptying the spiritual space. When faith in king and officials shatters, when the walls of the fortress of power crack, the people of Iran will have nowhere left to lean except for an entirely new hope. Jeremiah's terror is not the end. It is a painful surgery to remove the tumors of hatred and pride preparing for a miraculous rebirth. What has passed leaves an image of a dilapidated Tehran, where the fracture has reached the very top of the superstructure. The old throne is shattered, the warrior's will has melted, and a nation stands on the brink of the greatest change in history. But amidst the ruins of power and the darkness of fear, a strange light is beginning to seep out from secret basements. What will rise from the ashes of this judgment? Decoding the fifth prophecy. Jeremiah 49:38b-39. The throne upon the land of fire. Amidst the desolate ruins of the power mansions in Tehran, a different strange reality is quietly rising. While the state sinks into turmoil and military bunkers become obsessions of death in closed apartments and quiet suburban gardens, millions of Iranians are kneeling. They are not praying for a fractured establishment. They are seeking a peace unprecedented in history. Women remove their headscarves in spiritual freedom. Veterans who once served in the core forces now lay down their guns to choose the path of love. This is not a street riot. It is a massive spiritual migration, turning Iran into the nation with the fastest growing rate of people turning to Christ in the world. Never has the world witnessed such a powerful paradox of faith. Within a nation that was once a fortress of extremist theocracy, a massive underground church is spreading like groundwater through layers of hard rock. When every political support collapses, when earthly gods fall and fear swallows the military's will, the Persian people begin to search for a throne that is never shaken. They realize that promises of hatred cannot fill the void of the soul. This silent revolution is living proof that an old era has died to make way for a miraculous rebirth. The light of the final promise in Jeremiah's vision. In the final moments of the vision concerning the land of Elam, after witnessing the breaking of weapons and the fall of kings, the prophet's voice suddenly shifts from stern to tender, from judgment to a promise full of grace. Amidst the dark night of the vision, Jeremiah saw a great radiance descend upon the land of Elam. It was not the fire of war, but the glory of a true throne. The voice of God echoed, dispelling all terror, "I will set my throne in Elam, yet I will restore the fortunes of Elam in days to come." Jeremiah 49:38b-39. Imagine Jeremiah's amazement as he saw the people of Elam, once shackled by hatred and held captive by false ideologies, now being liberated. They are not returning in a mere geographical sense, but returning to the nature of tolerance and love that God predestined for this nation since the time of Cyrus. My throne, mentioned by God, is not a seat of power in Tehran, but his sovereignty within the hearts of the Persian people. Jeremiah saw thousands of years in advance that after every arrogant throne is removed, God would directly set his throne in this land to begin an era of restoration. Decoding the vision. When the heavenly throne takes the Persian heart, the sentence of restoration, Jeremiah saw, is the final code to understanding Iran today. The Bible does not speak of total annihilation, but of a surgery to save a life. Setting the throne. The fact that millions of Iranians are secretly converting is the moment God establishes his kingdom in their hearts. He does not seize land with tanks. He seizes their hearts with love. Restoring the captives. This is spiritual liberation. The Iranian people are escaping the captivity of fear and hatred to find their way back to the light. The current explosion of underground churches in Iran is not accidental. It is the word-for-word execution of Jeremiah's promise for the latter days. God destroyed the military and political power of Elam so that nothing would remain to prevent him from setting his throne at the center of this nation. Why does restoration begin in the middle of a land of fire? The nature of grace is that it always appears in the place of greatest suffering. When political idols collapse and terror exposes human helplessness, that is when God's throne becomes most radiant. Iran's transformation from an adversary into a restored land is a testament to the power of prophecy. Jeremiah saw in advance that no matter how aggressive the Persian ram might be, or how terrifying the Magog alliance, the ultimate end is redemption. The Iranians finding faith today are the captives returning to the foot of the eternal throne. An image of Iran shedding the cloak of hatred to put on the robe of faith. The sentence for Elam has ended in cleansing, and now is the time for rebirth. The old throne is shattered, but God's throne has been set down, carrying the breath of a completely new era for this ancient land. But as the prophetic clock in Iran points to the final seconds, what awaits the world ahead? What message does this Persian land hold for our generation? Connecting the pieces on the doomsday chessboard. We have traveled through a breathtaking journey from ancient visions by the Ulai River to the earth-shattering explosions in Tehran today. The 5 shocking things happening in Iran are not isolated events, but perfect links in a grand design and the identification. Daniel pointed directly to the rise of the Persian ram. The alliance Ezekiel exposed the handshake between Russia and Iran 2,600 years ago. The breaking Jeremiah accurately prophesied the neutralization of Elam's missile system, the bow, the collapse. The sentence for the supreme leaders, king and officials has been executed. The restoration. A spiritual throne is rising from the very ruins of the old establishment. When placing all these pieces together, we no longer see random political fluctuations. We see the hand of the Almighty turning the wheel of history. Iran is not just a nation. It is the prophetic clock ticking away its final seconds. Because what happens in this land is a warning to the entire world. If prophecies about Iran, a distant nation with ancient code names, can be fulfilled with such precision in the 21st century, it means the Bible is absolute truth. Every human arrogance, every nuclear weapon system, and every political throne is small before His will. Iran is living proof that no power can stop the final script of humanity as it draws to a close. The world is rushing toward a global conflict where alliances have formed and sentences have been pronounced. The most important message of this journey lies not in destruction, but in restoration. The image of the throne in Elam teaches us that even in the fiercest judgment, grace is always present. The spiritual awakening of millions of Iranians amidst the smoke of airstrikes is a reminder when every earthly support collapses, that is when humans find the eternal support. This is not just the story of the Iranians. It is the story of each of us. In an unstable world where superpowers growl and doomsday weapons are loaded, the question is not, what will happen next? But, where are you standing on that spiritual map? The explosions in Tehran, the fall of leaders, and the rise of faith in Persia are the alarm bells sent to our generation. Prophecy was not written for us to fear, but for us to wake up. When you see the ram rise and the bow broken, know that the day of judgment and redemption is near. History is not a series of chaotic events. History is His story, His story. And Iran is the most dramatic chapter leading us toward the dawn of a new era. If you feel the call of faith through these words, please leave a comment of Amen, or share the thing you appreciated most from these prophecies to help spread His light. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to join our community where we learn together, hold fast to our faith, and walk in God's guidance every day. Let your ship of faith be steered steadily starting today. May the peace and blessings of the Lord be with all of you.